It seems like every time a hotly anticipated movie releases, social media must undergo the same discourse every single time, learning nothing every single time. But what are people on Rotten Tomatoes saying? And then from there follows another pointless conversation that completely fizzles out, because we'll repeat the damn thing next time there's a big new blockbuster out. If the movie gets a high percentage on Rotten Tomatoes, it's viewed as a huge victory for the fans. And if not, oh, who cares what Rotten Tomatoes thinks? This is why I don't trust Rotten Tomatoes. Those guys are so out of touch. You've got argument after argument after argument. The critics didn't like the movie, but the fans loved it. People who like the movie decry any and all criticism. People who dislike the movie don't understand why people who agree with them are being dunked on. I mean, God forbid a person have standards. And it just makes everything insufferable for a bit. And I guess it's not like Rotten Tomatoes haven't indulged this themselves. Gotta ride that sensationalism wave. There's a lot of movies I'm looking forward to this year. Toy Story 5, Spider-Man Brand New Day, but what I'm not looking forward to is more desperately trying to rationalize and spin every single criticism into some non-issue that these Rotten Tomatoes critics had the audacity to spew. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't know where to even begin with this much ignorance. But I guess I'll start with a common sentiment I hear. Screw Rotten Tomatoes! Okay, so this alone is just a fundamental misunderstanding of what the Rotten Tomatoes website is. I've heard people refer to them as quote-unquote Rotten Tomatoes critics, but that isn't the case either. You see, Rotten Tomatoes isn't a big corporation with a bunch of critics stationed in cubicles writing reviews for the website. Critics and media outlets will gain Rotten Tomatoes approval to have their works sourced. This isn't review by review, it's person by person and company by company, and it largely depends on journalistic legitimacy, subscriber and follow counts, how long the outlet has been established. So just because a Rotten Tomatoes administrator might not agree with a review, or maybe thinks the review isn't very well written, it's largely irrelevant. What Rotten Tomatoes does do is source those reviews and sorts them into positive and negative. Anything above 6 out of 10 receives a nice ripe red tomato, and anything below receives a rotten tomato, represented by this green squidge here. Then, once all those reviews are counted up, they contribute to the final tomato meter percentage to determine if the movie is a ripe tomato or a rotten one, with the certified fresh tomato going to movies with exceptionally high tomato scores. Now, this is all mutually beneficial. These reviews make up the content on Rotten Tomatoes, but Rotten Tomatoes serves as publicity for the journalists and the movies, and a high tomato meter is good publicity. It's clear why the website is as successful as it is. But that's not all there is to Rotten Tomatoes, as there is also the audience score, where anyone can leave their thoughts on the movie. Users get to rank the films out of 10 via the star system, and that also gets categorized into positive and negative, contributing to a popcorn meter that functions the same as the tomato meter. So basically, Rotten Tomatoes just does its job. It sorts. Why would you blame Rotten Tomatoes for negative reviews? I don't listen to the critic scores. I only listen to the audience scores. If you are on Rotten Tomatoes and you're paying attention to one score and not the other, you are missing the point. The critic scores are by vetted, approved journalists with professional backgrounds. The audience scores are basically any idiot with internet access. Both of these scores seek to tell us something, though. The critic scores are there to determine the quality of the movie overall, how well it holds up under a critical angle. But a critic's job is still to be reasonable and account for the target demographic to at least some extent. The audience score is more of a gauge of user approval and general audience approval, which is why sometimes you get a discrepancy between the audience and the critic scores. While many audience members are just looking for a good time, critics will be carefully identifying what does and doesn't work. That's not to say every critic is good. Trust me, some critics are absolute ass at their jobs, which is why Rotten Tomatoes is only a reference point. It is not the be-all, end-all. You're not actually supposed to determine a movie's quality based on either of these scores. It exists purely as a point of reference. Not every intelligent, critically minded person is going to be a Rotten Tomatoes approved critic, just as every Rotten Tomatoes approved critic isn't necessarily going to be an intelligent, critically minded person. Dumb fucks slip through the cracks in every industry, journalism especially included.
I don't really know if Shadow and Maria should have been hanging out together so much, because Shadow, very much was adult coded, but they didn't need to watch movies together, cozying up in her room.
I think maybe because they kind of mimic, the toxic manosphere.
I don't really think she knows what she's saying anymore.
And I'm pretty sure we all still stand by what we said. Yet here I am in a Super Mario hoodie.
Why do you sound like you are drunk, you ableist meanie weenie? And even then, Rotten Tomatoes isn't necessarily a great gauge for audience approval either, as A, not everyone in the world has a Rotten Tomatoes account and submits reviews. In fact, probably only a very small percentage of viewers would think to do that. How many people do you actually know that log into Rotten Tomatoes to rate a movie after watching it? How many people do you actually know who liked the 2017 Justice League movie? Apparently more than half of us do, but I haven't met anyone that liked it. Rise of Skywalker, what a fucking piece of shit.
They fly now! They fly now!
Oh, apparently most of us liked it. 98%? I'm sure that Melania must be fucking awesome. B, the audience score can easily be fudged by bots and alt accounts, as it has been done many, many times before. There are going to be times when Rotten Tomatoes scores are highly questionable or sometimes downright grim. And I will say, Rotten Tomatoes is not above criticism. This method of categorization isn't exactly ideal. It makes film criticism more accessible, sure, but it also oversimplifies it. The amount of people to actually click on a full review from here is small, and I just don't think a film's quality or reception can be simplified to a PNG of fruit or a number. It's why a lot of people don't like number scores. Films are nuanced and opinions are nuanced. Numbers are not. And organizing them purely into positive and negative looks at this in the most binary sense possible. It becomes this dick measuring contest of whose score is higher than whose, yet all of these things are rated in a vacuum and are not meant to be compared. Otherwise, the critics say, The Devil All the Time is a worse movie than Sing. And no, the audience score doesn't get a pass either, because according to that, Spider-Man 1 is worse than Sing. These are clearly ranked based on satisfaction within their own terms. You are not meant to compare the numbers, but it's not like Rotten Tomatoes doesn't encourage that. The thing is though, technically there are 3 tiers, but just sorting them as bad, good, and exceptional is just bizarre. 5 out of 10 isn't typically considered bad, just average, but it classifies as a Rotten Tomato, making it incredibly cutthroat and leaving no space for just bone average. Although, is an average movie worse than a bad movie? That's another conversation right there. But just look at Man of Steel for one example. Oh look, it's got a Rotten Critics score, in at 56%. But wouldn't that mean, based on Rotten Tomatoes logic, that Man of Steel was viewed favorably by over half of the critics? But okay, because we're so close to 50%, it also suggests that the film is incredibly divisive. So rather than this middle-of-the-road 50%er, a lot of the people that did like it, which is if anything the majority share here, they had pretty high praise. Which means that the person going to see Man of Steel is probably either going to really enjoy it, or not get anything out of it at all. Which means that a middling number like this doesn't truly represent the film's quality on either end, whether you love the movie or hate the movie. This is why I would say that generally Metacritic is overall the stronger aggregate site thanks to its more nuanced red, yellow, and green system, and what do you know, it doesn't create nearly as much discourse. Even that isn't a perfect way of knowing a film or project's quality though. A film is only as good as you think it is. That's really all that matters here. So why would you ever trust a critic or another audience member? Why would you ever let a PNG of food determine whether or not you should go see a movie? Wow, you motherfucking basic bitches. Had I trusted Rotten Tomatoes, I might not have paid for the tickets to go to the Prince Charles Cinema to see The Room. And I might not have had an absolutely magical night with a dear friend. There's a rare occasion where critics and audiences had the exact same consensus on Joker 2. But I guess I'm the real clown here because I liked it. Good thing I didn't trust Rotten Tomatoes then, isn't it? Because I now feel richer for the experience. Genuinely, if you are making decisions on what films to see based on a review aggregate made as a very basic, very flawed reference point, please, for the love of God, get a perspective of your own. The only real way to know if a movie is good or not is to see it yourself and to make up your own mind. The rest is just conversation. So there's no need to shout and yell at each other. There's really no need to dismiss sentiments positive or negative so long as they're not actually hurting anyone. So if the critics give the movie you love a Rotten Tomato, don't worry about it. Really don't. All that matters is that you can watch it and you can enjoy it. And if people love a movie you hate, unless it's like a movie adaptation of Mein Kampf or something, I'm sure you can find a way to just live with that. I guess the moral of the story is, soak up all the entertainment you can. You will be richer for the experience. Ideally in the cinema, with the biggest screen you could possibly get. But if that's just not possible, you know, as Fleetwood Mac once said, you can go your own way, sailor. Just don't be some dunderhead that lets other people think for you and represent you. Rotten Tomatoes isn't you, it's not me, it's not any of us. It's a review aggregate sorting website. Let's just treat it for what it is already. Get it off the crucifix because it's not the Messiah, it's just a very naughty boy. Now, where would I be without the generosity of my trusty patrons? We're going to start with a shout out for the patrons in the $10 and above tiers. We have Just Another Evil Robot Clone Seeking Revenge, Xander Wolf, Ghostly Phantom, Twilord, KB, Sad Goku, Dare Denny, Kale Bennett. If I had more space, I'd explain that. It's taken me way too long to update this. And Mr. SP, Sirius the Skeptic, and Biotin. And now, on to the patrons in the $5 and above tier. We've got Joseph Tribble, Press Play to Jason, Gideon Wells, Basic Content, Ben Raven, Reese Burns, Manalza, Goat Cannon, Silver, Josh Strider, Grant Allen, Marv Animation, Cho Henshin, RT0, Carl X, SSS06, and Vera Wild. Thank you, good folks, so much for your generosity. The video's now over. Get out.